Joining me on the line is my friend Tom McDonald. You remember him from such hits as Facts by Tom McDonald with me in Cameo. But the reason we're having Tom on right now is because he's doing something awesome this Memorial Day weekend. He's raising money for veterans. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Ben. I think the last time I saw you, you were a #1 Billboard charting rapper. I've got one of these plaques in the mail to you as we speak.
Amazing. Well, I mean, as you know, it was my lifelong ambition to eventually have one of those. And then I retired at the top of the game. So, Hall of Fame, 1 for 1. But obviously, you're the one who did all the work. So you did it. I didn't do anything. I spoke into a microphone like a robot, and that apparently was good enough. So that's excellent news. Well, you're doing something that's actually much more important. So every year on Memorial Day, you have this giant charity sale to raise money for American veterans. You're doing something cool this year. Why don't you tell us about it?
So this year is the 3rd annual Hangover Gang Memorial Day sale. So every year we do a big sale on Memorial Day, which is partially a fundraiser for U.S. veterans and their families. Last year, we raised $137,000. The year prior to that, we raised $70,000. So we're hovering around like $210,000 right now. And we're going to do it again. So there's a couple different T-shirts. There's this one that says, the only time I support kneeling for the flag. And there's a picture of a soldier kneeling with a machine gun. And every single penny from this shirt gets donated to veterans and their families. So we go through a charity called US Vets. We did a lot of research and a lot of reading and tried to figure out which was the best charity to go to donate with. And the problem with a lot of the charities is a lot of the actual donations get eaten up in overhead and operating costs and stuff like that. So you only end up with, if you donate $1, maybe 10 or 20 cents ends up going to the cause that you're donating for. So US Vets has sort of one of the highest percentages of the money that gets donated actually goes to veterans and their families. And I think it's around 90%. So 90% of the donations will go straight to veterans and their families. Hangovergang.com. Everything's 25% off. There's autographed albums and autographed T-shirts and new hats and hoodies and the charity items. And I think, the first year we did it, we raised 70 grand. The next year was 137. So we almost doubled our first year in year 2. And I'm hoping this year in year 3, we can double that 137 and maybe come in around $250,000 for veterans and their families.
Well, that is awesome. The merch is 25% off with code MemorialHog. And Tom, you're also signing albums and shirts and photos along with the new gear and custom denim jackets that are painted by you. There's all sorts of very cool stuff. If you head on over to hangovergangofficial.com, that sale ends at midnight on Memorial Day. So make sure that you clock in before then because you'll get amazing product. And also you're going to be helping out veterans as Tom does every year. So while I have you on the line, I have to congratulate you on the recent song God Mode, which again, a #1 gigantic hit, which is Your Way. So, where did that song come from?
Well, it was kind of your fault, Ben. After Facts, I thought I was the most hated rapper on earth, and I think you may have taken that title from me. So after we did Facts, there was this ruthless onslaught of just hate from the internet, and I bit my tongue and bit my tongue and bit my tongue. And it got to the point where I was like, I'm going to let him have it. I'm going to let him know how I'm really feeling about all this stuff. So I wrote God Mode, which was sort of 9.5 minutes of me just kind of addressing the drama and lambasting the quote unquote haters, which is hilarious that you can write a 9.5 minute rap song with no chorus, no melody, nothing at all. Just me freaking out for 9.5 minutes on a record. And it ends up going #1, which was, it was almost as good of a troll to me as Facts was. So that was our God Mode was our 42nd #1 on Billboard. These guys got to get tired of sending these plaques to the house, man. I swear.
It's just unbelievable. People should go check out that song as well. It is indeed hilarious. And Tom goes God Mode. Go check it out right now. Tom, it's great to see you. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, Ben.
We'll get to more on this in just one moment. First, diversification is key. One notable example of an investor who did not diversify their portfolio is Carl Icahn. Icahn held a significant stake in Hertz. When Hertz filed for bankruptcy in 2020 due to the impact of COVID-19, the value of Icahn's investment plummeted. Icahn eventually sold his stake at a big loss. Diversification is really important. During times of economic uncertainty or market volatility, investors tend to flock to gold as a safe haven asset. Its value tends to increase during turbulent times, providing a buffer against market downturns. That's why a lot of people are turning to gold right now. It's why Birch Gold is busier than ever. Birch Gold understands that navigating financial decisions can be daunting. That's why their dedicated in-house IRA department is there to guide you every step of the way. Birch Gold's team is always ready to provide answers and clarity. Whether it's about fees, taxes on rollovers, or the timing of the process, they're here to ensure you feel valued and well-informed. Text Ben to 989898 to talk to one of Birch Gold's experts and claim your free info kit on gold. You'll learn how to convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. The best part is, it's not going to cost you a penny out of pocket. Just text Ben to 989898 today. That's Ben to 989898. Let's jump into the vaunted Ben Shapiro Show mailbag. Taylor says, "Hey Ben, I'm a recent veteran who wants to get involved in politics, specifically foreign affairs, and would like to finish my degree to get me a leg up on my peers. I have heard you mention that poli-sci degrees are virtually useless. What degree should I seek instead?" So they're useless in and of themselves. As a piece of credentialing, they're not useless. Unfortunately, I wish that they were. So if you're just seeking to get a credential from a high-level university so that you can parlay that into a foreign affairs job, and that is a prereq for getting a foreign affairs job, you go and get the poli-sci degree. And just on a realistic level, you go, you spend the money, you spend the time, you spend the brain power, you get the poli-sci degree from Georgetown, and then you can work in foreign affairs. If that's the ticket to entry, that's what you got to do. When I say that there's no inherent value to a poli-sci degree, that's a critique of the entire system, not of individuals who go and get a poli-sci degree. I had to get a poli-sci degree in order to go to Harvard Law, and I had to go to Harvard Law in order to become a lawyer. Will says, "It seems to me China's underlying weakness demographically as well as technologically makes it more dangerous, not less in the short term. Given the Biden administration's clear messages sent via Afghanistan, Israel, and especially in its weak response to the Houthis, is a Chinese invasion or at least blockade of Taiwan imminent? And what, if anything, could we do about it at this point? As a Navy veteran myself, the downfall of America's military might is of great concern to me. If Trump is elected, is there any signal that he will address the shortcomings in recruiting and in naval ship numbers that have gotten so much worse, especially with our economic problems? I'm not super worried about a direct Chinese invasion because that would cost hundreds of thousands of Chinese lives and be a slog for them. Amphibious landings are very difficult. Plus, Taiwan has some resources along those lines. I am worried about blockade. If China decided to blockade and then destroy any ship or airplane attempting to break the blockade, that could be a real problem. Now, the question is, you end up with basically the Cuban Missile Crisis, East version, right? What if the United States, for example, tries to fly in resupply planes? Are the Chinese going to shoot that down and risk a direct nose-to-nose confrontation with the United States? Or are they basically going to just continue a blockade indefinitely in the hopes that the United States will get bored? Or will the Taiwanese government capitulate? Now, these are the questions that nobody really has the answer to. Is the United States willing to try to break a naval blockade by sending in resupply ships through the blockade? And will the Chinese be willing to shoot those ships? Now, the reality is that if Donald Trump were in office, they would not be trying this because Donald Trump is too unpredictable. Donald Trump's foreign policy was, I have a red button and I can hit that red button at any time and you don't know, and maybe I don't know when I'm going to hit that red button. And that's pretty good foreign policy as it turns out. It's pretty scary. As Donald Trump once said to me directly, if they believe there's a 5% chance I'll do it, they're not going to do it. Fact check true. Turns out when you got the biggest club on the block, you don't have to wield it very often. You just have to make credible your threat. But Joe Biden is the least credible president in American history. Truly. Mitch says, I'm a disabled Navy veteran with a background in the nuclear industry, a field I find both rewarding and enjoyable. My field is highly specialized, is essential, all I know how to do. In recent years, my employer has become deeply involved in promoting DEI, allyship, and various LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign initiatives. Our bonuses are now tied to active participation in these initiatives, which has created a sense of obligation to engage with them. I find myself hesitant to fully express my own opinion and concerns, particularly when they differ from the prevailing narrative, because of the fear of retaliation from coworkers and my employer. I'm at an impasse, torn between my core values and the need to provide for my family in an industry that is so specialized that leaving it is not a viable option. Should I shut up and keep my opinions to myself so as not to jeopardize my position and livelihood? If that's the best option, how do I expunge the disgusting feeling that comes with keeping it all in? Love the show. Wishing continued success for you, your family, and the Daily Wire team. Well, depending on what those initiatives are and whether they violate the Civil Rights Act, which they very well might, you might have a lawsuit on your hands. And if they then try to fire you, then they would have another lawsuit on their hands for retaliation. So I would recommend talking to a lawyer about the specifics of those policies. I'd also recognize that, I can't make that decision for you, nor really can anybody else. Obviously, first priority, you got to put food on the table for your family. At the same time, if you can't spiritually take what's happening at your company, then more power to you for making a move in defiance of your own economic interests. But that's a risk-reward assessment that every individual has to make on their own. And Jason says, hey, Ben, I heard you talking about how your son is interested in submarines and asked about the difference between different types of submarine. I'm a 9-year sub-veteran and served as a submarine sonar technician on board the USS Scranton and the USS Kentucky. Feel free to ask anything you want about submarines of the United States and around the world. I'm happy to share my knowledge and experience. That's awesome. Okay, so we'll take your email address and I will have my son hit you with 800 questions because that dude loves submarines. Ben says, hey, Ben, earlier this week on Backstage, you and the gang spent a long time talking about freedom. One thing nobody mentioned was a worldview whereby freedom is always from something else. For example, when the Israelites wanted to be free to go into the desert to serve God, some force took that freedom away. In that sense, freedom is like a preposition. It doesn't make sense without a referent, namely an action that someone wants to partake in and a force that constrains them. What are your thoughts on this definition? So that is true in the sense that freedom is immunity from. So this is what I was talking about in terms of rights. There are two types of rights that we in the United States particularly tend to mix up. One is freedom from, which is immunity from, meaning that the government should not have the power to encroach upon your decision to do X. Right? The government doesn't have that inherent power. You have a limitation against the government. That is what the founders meant when they talked about freedom. Then there is freedom to. Do you have a right, for example, to engage in the use of... Now, if you're talking about freedom from government intervention in that space, that's an open question. And that's a pretty hot question right now. Some people say, like I do, that you don't have a freedom from government intervention on the local level, but you may not want to empower the government on the federal level to go after prosecuting users on the local level, for example. That is a different question from, do you have a moral right to use? You do not have a moral freedom to use. And we tend to mix those two up. So what we tend to do is we tend to say, sure, I have an immunity from government because what I'm doing is morally ambiguous and or acceptable. And that's not the same thing. Abby says, hey, Ben, as a conservative, I believe there's no better function of the American welfare state than the care and success of our veterans. However, the very first instances of the expansion of the federal government entailed benefits for veterans after the Civil War, which dovetailed into the New Deal era state expansion and the bloated administrative agencies we have today. How do you reconcile the following? That one, that the VA's care is extremely poor and still insufficient for our modern veterans. Two, that the government's desire to provide for veterans opened the door to the modern welfare and administrative state. So these are two separate questions. One of the answers to the failures of the VA is to, in fact, allow people better benefits that they can use in the private side of the industry. Right? That would be, to me, the better answer, is to provide more and better benefits to veterans so they can opt out of the VA system and use a privatized healthcare system if they so choose. As far as the government's attempts to broaden out the benefits available to veterans, to everybody, the question that I have is, did everybody serve their country in the same way that veterans did? I don't think I deserve the same benefits that veterans do. That seems bizarre to me. I didn't serve in the military. It seems to me that when you sign up for the military, our country, both to recruit people and as an expression of gratitude for your service, ought to give you some special consequences, some special benefits. I don't know why that should apply to, like, Joe Schmo, who went to Berkeley. Michael says, hey, Ben, what are the chances the June debate will be used as an excuse by Democrats to get rid of Biden and bring in Michelle Obama as the heroine that will save the country? I don't think that she has any interest in running. That is the big obstacle right there. I don't think that Michelle Obama wants to run. I don't think she has interest in running. And I think that she is deeply afraid that her image would change from Oprah Winfrey Nouveau back into radical Michelle Obama of her Princeton years, which it pretty quickly would. Edward says, imagine you're coaching President Trump in his first debate with Joe Biden. How would you prepare him for it? What should his strategy be? How should he talk about the indictments? When asked about the indictments, he should say what he wants to say, which is, I had 0 criminal indictments against me, literally my entire life as a massively public figure. And then I ran for president against Joe Biden, and now there are multiple indictments against me. I don't think that that's a coincidence. Joe, do you think that political rivals should be prosecuted by your DOJ? And then Joe Biden will say something like, well, maybe if they commit crimes. And then Donald Trump can say, well, then get ready, bud, because when I'm president, my DOJ will do to you what you are doing to me. Which is the line that he used against Hillary Clinton, if you recall, back in 2016. If I were president, you'd be in jail right now, right? That never happened, of course. Alrighty, folks, we've reached the end of the show. We'll be back here Tuesday with much more. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.